On this video, I'm talking about the new home buying construction process and how the contract differs when buying a new home versus a used home. Hi, I'm Amy Hayslett. I'm a realtor in Phoenix. And on my channel, I talk about life in Phoenix, moving to Arizona, and the Phoenix real estate market. So if those things are of interest to you, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and ring the bell notification because I don't want you to miss my next video. Now, let's get started. Here in Arizona, the resale contracts are written by the Arizona Association of Realtors, whereas the builder's contracts are written by the builder's attorneys, and they're meant to protect the builder. Now, each of the builder's contracts are slightly different and unique, but there are several things that are very similar, and you really want to get acquainted with these before you go ahead and buy a new build home. So, starting with earnest deposits. Your earnest money is negotiable on a resale contract. So you could essentially come in and say, I want to give $500 earnest deposit, or you could say, I want to give a $5,000 earnest deposit or even more. And then it's really up to the seller to negotiate back with you. So on a new build though, these earnest deposits are pretty much set ahead of time, and the builders want to be pretty consistent. Typically, you're going to have to give a bit more money for an earnest deposit on a new build because the builder is going to use that money to help build the home. Also with builders, there may be additional deposits other than earnest deposits that are due. For example, oftentimes when you go to the design center, depending on how much you spend, there may be additional deposits for your options that you choose. Also with regard to earnest money deposits is the question of refundability. There are many ways on a resale contract where a buyer may be able to cancel and get their earnest deposit back, whereas with a new build contract, your earnest money deposit may be at risk from the time you sign. Finally, with regard to earnest deposits, where does your money go when you make the deposit? So on a resale contract, traditionally your earnest deposit is held by the escrow or title company, which typically is a neutral third party. However, on a builder contract, your money is going to go directly into the builder's pocketbook, and they're going to start using that money to build your home. Now let's talk about closing costs. Builders often give you an incentive to buy their homes by giving you a closing costs incentive when you use their lender. Now, with resale, you can also negotiate for the seller to pay for your closing costs, and typically that's not going to be tied into the use of any lender. What you want to watch out for with the builder is to make sure that your closing costs aren't going to be exorbitantly higher. Does the lender charge a little bit more on closing costs? Are their rates a little bit higher? And also look at the title and escrow costs. Are some of those costs that are traditionally paid for by the seller on a resale now pushed over to the buyer side on the builder's contract? Now let's cover inspections and due diligence. In the resale contract, buyers have 10 days after contract to do their due diligence and inspections on the home. This includes reviewing things like seller disclosures, homeowners association documents, preliminary title documents, and other documents related to the home and area. If the buyer finds something objectionable about the property, either during the physical inspection of the home or during their research and review of documents, they can cancel and potentially get their earnest money deposit back because these are contingencies in the resale contract. With a new home construction contract, the buyer is expected to read all of these documents up front and do their research before they sign the contract. If later they should decide that they find something objectionable in these documents or on the physical property itself or surrounding area, and they choose to cancel because of this, their earnest deposit and other deposits might be likely forfeited if they cancel. Now let's talk about the pre-closing walkthrough, and this is something you want to do whether you're building new or buying a resale home. So with a resale contract, if there's an issue with the home that the seller was supposed to correct, or maybe it's an issue that the home's not in the same condition as when you bought it, you can actually delay the closing until the seller corrects the item. With new homes, however, the builder is usually going to require you to close, and they'll address those items that they can't fix before closing after you've closed and taken possession of the home. Now let's talk about close of escrow date. With a resale home, you negotiate the close of escrow date between the seller and the buyer, and usually you're going to know what that date is when you go under contract. But with new homes, obviously, there's a construction process. So it's hard for the builder to give you a date that's set in stone from the get-go. They're going to give you a pretty big window of when they think they're going to close and just give you an estimate to start off with. And there can be some pretty scary verbiage in the contract that may state that they have up to 2 years to build a home. So believe me, the builders want to build your home as fast as possible, but things can happen out of their control. So they're going to have that verbiage in there to protect themselves. And when they're finally ready to give you the closing date, it's probably going to be somewhere about 30 days out from the time frame when the home is going to be ready to close and move in, depending on the builder. Now let's talk about contingencies, because on a resale contract, there's many contingencies that are written into the standard contract that protect the buyer that you will not find on a new home sales contract. For example, the resale contract has a due diligence time frame that allows the buyer to inspect the property, find out about the surrounding area, and review all kinds of documents like seller disclosures, preliminary title reports, and homeowners association documents. It also gives the buyer a chance to have a physical inspection of the property. And if they find anything objectionable here that would make them cancel the contract, this contingency gives them a way to get their earnest deposit back should they decide to cancel during the due diligence time frame. Loan contingencies is another thing that's different with new builds typically than with resale contracts. In the resale contract, your loan contingency typically goes up until 3 days prior to close of escrow. So if something were to happen, like you lost your job or interest rates went up and now you can't qualify for the loan, you can cancel and get your earnest deposit back. Loan contingencies on new builds, though, will not last that long, so you'll want to check that builder's contract to see how they work. And in some cases, by the time you sign, that loan contingency could already be up, especially if the builder required that you got pre-qualified with their lender right away. There's also an appraisal contingency when you buy a resale contract that you may not get on new builds. With a new build, if the appraisal comes in low, you may be required to come up with a difference in money due to the low appraisal, or you may have to cancel and your earnest money may be at risk. There are certainly pros and cons when building a house, including understanding the contract. I hope this gives you some insight as to how the contract differs when buying a new home versus buying a used home. Let me know if you would add anything, and if you want to learn more about buying and building a new home, check out my video, Questions to Ask When Buying a New Construction Home. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.